Well, good afternoon to all of you. Look, it would be really presumptuous on my part to try your patience at this stage of our conversations at the end of 2 days of extraordinary, discussion and discourse on a large number of issues. But it is by way of my duty as the Think 20 chair that I stand before you and attempt to say a few words. Firstly, I want to thank all the participants from around the world who took time out from their own busy schedules to come all the way to Mysore and be with us. And above all, to have supported us throughout the past 8 to 9 months. A number of events were held, and by now I know I've made such a large number of new friends as well. I want to thank the members of the International Advisory Board who have also supported us throughout our work. I want to thank the members of the task forces who have actually done all the heavy lifting. So please give them a round of applause as well. I want to thank Dr. Samir Saran and his entire crew, the G20 Secretariat, for doing an outstanding job. I'll be remiss if I didn't mention that I want to thank other members of the core group of Think 20 India. So that includes Dr. Sachin Chaturvedi and his colleagues as well. The G20 Secretariat, very important structure that was created by the Government of India, and it's represented here this evening by Ambassador Muktesh Pardesi. So through you, Muktesh, I want to thank the G20 Secretariat and the Government of India, the Ministry of External Affairs, the External Affairs Minister, the Sherpa as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, over the past 2 days, we've had, as I said before, very rich discussions, a kind of rich harvest in my view. It's not quite over. The last ball, as we say in cricket, has not yet been played. Though this was a T20 group, in my view, and for those of you who don't know what T20 means in cricket, it's the shorter version of the game. I can assure you that we don't intend it to be the short version of the game. For us, it's like a test match. It has to continue beyond the Indian presidency as well. So please keep that in mind. We have successfully published, as Dr. Saran had pointed out, hundreds of policy papers, too numerous to be recounted individually. The task forces, as you've seen today, have successfully come up with and launched their own communiques. Many side events were also held in Mysore. The first one that I attended was the conversation between Task Force 3 and Task Force 6. There was also a conversation between T20 and T7 in the Bellagio format. And I think all these conversations, plus the ones that you would have had outside of my knowledge, these are very important, and we must value their content, your commitment to these dialogues, and the fact that we should continue with such conversations. Now, you'll all agree that G20 is the most diverse and representative group that exists today, and the need of the hour is to ensure that we continue to work together as a team, bring about greater cohesion and cooperation, and above all, fundamentally, to ensure that its focus remains, whether now or in the future, on key developmental issues. And this was also underscored by the minister yesterday. I also feel that multilateralism, which has been discussed today as well, as represented by the UN, as we all know, is dysfunctional. And I do feel that the G20 is providing a new opportunity for the world to come together, to actually create a new kind of multilateralism, in which we are all equal, in which we do not keep others out of the G20 conversation, one that actually still can hold out hope for us and for the future of humanity. For me, it's not an either-or issue, so it's not a question of the G20 trying to usurp the role of the formal UN structures, but nor should it be a case of the United Nations or the UN Security Council in particular trying to usurp the role of the G20. So we have to be mindful of the fact that just as, at least for a year or more, the UN and the League of Nations, which sank without a trace in 1946, actually coexisted. In this case, we want to ensure that the G20 that does not sink. Anything else may sink, but the G20 must continue to ride the storm and coexist with UN structures, not to condemn them, not to confront them, but to actually try and seek better reform. Both can coexist, in my view. It is not my intention to summarize anything, as I said at the beginning, but it's important to acknowledge the contribution of the think tank community, the research community, those that have also come in from other spaces, vital spaces, like those that study societal issues and well-being and ethics. It's the first time that we brought this kind of an eclectic crowd together. And I think it's actually enriched our discourse and conversation. I acknowledge your contributions, but I urge the think tank community to keep up the pressure. We must keep up the pressure on G20 governments in particular, and to do so in a credible manner will require that we ensure that the conversations that we have in India or in future in Brazil and South Africa, that these conversations are representative. If they are not representative enough, they will not be credible. And if they're not credible, we will not be able to bring about the required pressure on governments to take note of what we are saying. So I think you will agree that in India we have succeeded in doing this. We have people from all over the world. The conversations have covered virtually every theme and everyone in that spectrum across the world. So continuity in our efforts is very important. The question really is, how do we do it? What kind of continuity? How do we ensure that the experience of India, for instance, which I've heard is greatly valued by people, is also in its own way acceptable manner at the comfort level that suits the next presidency, that we pass this on in an appropriate manner. We can leave it to every presidency to devise and shape and curate their own structures, as we've just heard from colleagues from Brazil. But it would be a shame to let the efforts of this G20 presidency go in vain. And that really means allowing your hard work, your contributions to go in vain. So therefore, I urge each one of you to think about structures. This morning we heard Dr. Samir Saran and Dr. Sachin Chaturvedi briefly introduce to you the idea of the G20 Global Research Forum that was effectively proposed and launched by them. The final contours, I understand, are not yet in place, and it would be extremely useful for Dr. Samir and the Secretariat to actually reach out to you and seek your views further on how we might give some shape to this structure so that it can provide some continuity as well. The whole idea, as he had said, was to conduct research, to also use the convening power that we have in India to organize events and seminars and to provide the necessary inputs to the next presidency for their own consideration at the comfort level at which they wish to accept them. I hope we can therefore work out a structure that's fit for purpose. It is time also now, over the next few months, to hand over to Brazil the baton of the Think 20. Now, finally, I feel that the success of the G20 process will depend essentially on two very simple and fundamental things. One, the amount of interest that G20 governments themselves take in addressing key issues on which we have spent a great deal of time. Some take greater interest, some take lesser interest. And so again, it'll, sort of devolve on you to put that pressure and get them to think about these issues. The kind of pressure that the think tank community can generate on their own governments to contribute more to the G20 process will be one of the keys to future success. In this fractured world, by the way, don't worry too much about think tankers not being heard and being frustrated. Even governments are not really heard. Many of the governments themselves are quite helpless in addressing their own issues. So as think tankers, I think we can roll with the punches. And on the mezzanine floor, I saw that golden man, with a hat in that position. Many of you know what that means. Keep walking. Keep walking. I wish you all good health and success in all your endeavors until we meet again. Over to you, Dr. Saran. Thank you very much.